Give some thought to how your body will deliver your opening statement. How you will stand, how you will gesture, how you will focus your eyes right from the beginning. Plant your feet in a central location so you can see all the jurors. Start by standing still, and then later, if you have permission to move, move with a purpose. But begin by standing still. As you begin to speak, gesture immediately. So make sure your hands are in this ready position. To gesture immediately, imagine that there's this invisible shelf in front of you. And because all the experts agree that you need to begin with a theme, put that theme on the shelf. If it's a one-word theme, greed. That's what this case is about, and put that one word out there. You could do the classic, this is a case about greed, and do the one hand, other hand gesture. This is a case about greed, and that jump-starts your instinct to gesture. I read this theme in the paper yesterday. This is a case about a defendant who lied and lied and lied. A kind of accumulative gesture on the shelf. If you're doing the classic bumper sticker theme, desperate men do desperate things. We could do that with the double karate chop. Desperate men do desperate things. But your first impression on the jury has a lot to do with how you look immediately, at the very beginning when they are most focused. And you want to be open. Your body's saying to them, trust me folks, look, I'm being open with you, I'm not hiding anything. And I'm fearless. Go ahead, take your best shot. And I'm loose and comfortable and natural. Don't worry about me, think about what I'm saying. All of that radiates from gesturing immediately. So think about the words you will say, and then connect the gestures you will use, putting something on the shelf, to those words. There's a kind of gestural template for opening statement when you think about it. Everything that ends up in a courtroom is about two parties battling over a problem. So whether that's a plaintiff, a defendant, and a contracts case, or a prosecutor, a defendant, and a drug case, isn't that a gestural template that you can use for opening? So where will you begin telling us the story? Are you going to put the problem out there first and then tell us about the defendant and then get to the plaintiff? Or do you represent the plaintiff and you'll talk about them first? Or do you represent the defendant, but you're going to go after the plaintiff? In other words, suddenly there are three compartments of information: the defendant, the problem, and the plaintiff, and that gives you some guidance, a kind of memory aid as you tell the story. And when you tell stories, think about the fact that every story basically has three characteristics. Who's involved? The characters. Where are we? The setting. And what happened? The action. So as you tell that story, you've got three more points to think about. Who are the people involved in this case? And where are we? And what happened with those people in that location? So the gestures can be another way to give you a memory aid about telling the story. And as you tell that story, think about the fact that this shelf can be a kind of timeline. This happened, then this happened, then this happened. And since you're telling the story for the listener, wouldn't it be most helpful for your jury if that story flowed across the shelf from left to right for the viewer? So all patterns start to your right, whether that's January, February, or March, or 1, 2, 3. Put those things out there on the shelf. The way that we gesture naturally when we don't even know we are gesturing is that our gestures are completely connected to our words. So we can reverse engineer that and decide that at the beginning of the opening statement, connect your gestures to your words in a very conscious way. Pick the words, pick the gesture. Once you've picked them, practice. And that will get your body ready to deliver your opening statement. How do you think your way through your opening statement? How do you confidently say what you need to say and remember it? Well, make sure, first of all, that you know that you're saying the right thing. It's opening statement. You are stating the facts. You are not arguing. So everything you say has to pass this test. Are you saying something that will come from a witness, from a document, from an exhibit? If you are paraphrasing, if you are inferring or concluding from those facts, that's argument. To remember what you want to say, don't default to reading to the jury. It's a deadly way to communicate. And unless you've been to theater school or broadcasting school, chances are you are not an expressive, out-loud reader. You will not look them in the eye as you tell them that truth. So you want notes that will help you remember. And the people who study memory and cognition say this, that what the memory needs is an elaboration of memory. In other words, more ways of connecting things so they are easier to remember. So we're not literally pulling them out of thin air. Given that we gesture horizontally on the shelf, and rarely do we gesture vertically as we write on a piece of paper, what if the gesture patterns that we are using, as I demonstrated in the body, were replicated horizontally on your notes? What if your notes looked like this? What if you had the topic headings of the plaintiff, the defendant, and the problem that brings us to this courtroom, and under those headings you had bullet points, words and phrases to remember ideas, but not a script? And then this pattern is replicated on the shelf as you talk about the plaintiff and the defendant and the problem. There is nothing more satisfying than to think I'm in the middle of talking about the problem and I can't remember what's next, and you can look down and know exactly where on the paper to look. What if when you tell us the story, you tell us about the characters involved and the setting they are in and the action that they engaged in? And once again, this horizontal flow across the shelf is what is replicated with the muscle memory of your gestures. And then when you get to the specifics, let's imagine an intellectual property case, and you want to talk about the fact that they negotiated that licensing agreement, and then they licensed it with this part of the agreement in place, and then that license was violated, so that as you tell us the story, the shelf becomes the timeline of events. Then you have elaborated your memory. You have a way for the gestures and the notes and what's in your head to all be a similar pattern. Now, a thought about forgetting. What if I forget? That's the wrong question. The question is this: when you forget, how do you recover? Because you will forget. We forget in everyday conversation. What was I talking about? Oh yeah. So plan to forget. Here are a couple simple suggestions. As you are telling the story and you suddenly can't remember what happened next, say that. So members of the jury, what happened next? And then either think your way to that next idea or look in your notes. Use the generic transition line. So let's move on. And with that simple statement, let's move on, you have permission to stop and think or look at your notes. So have a plan when you forget. Then you can much more confidently move away from your notes with that elaborated memory and replicate the pattern on the paper, on the shelf with your gestures, and all of that will help you remember what you want to say in your opening statement. Now let's add the voice to your body and your brain for opening statement. Like a musician picking a tempo for a piece of music, you need to pick the tempo or the pace with which you will begin your opening statement. Don't start by talking too quickly, which is what we all do when we're nervous. Speak in phrases, not whole sentences. To use the body to assist that idea, gesture immediately, but with gestures that are slower and smoother. When we're nervous, we gesture with gestures that are small and fast and jerky. And when we gesture that way, we talk faster. If you gesture slower and you gesture smoother, you will control the pace at which you are speaking. So immediately gesture. And make sure you are starting with a theme worthy of being said that way. Don't start with the generic throat clearing of this is opening statement and what I say is not evidence. It's kind of like a roadmap. It's kind of like a table of contents. None of that is interesting. Start with your theme. Greed. That's what this case is about. Or desperate men do desperate things. Or this is about a defendant who lied and lied and lied. In other words, to start slowly and deliberately, you need to be saying something interesting. And that's why you want to pick a theme. Say it in phrases, gesture immediately in an expansive way that is slower and smoother. If you start by standing still, looking the jury in the eye, then you can make the choice as you speak to move with a purpose to another location. But always begin by standing still, so you can concentrate on the words that you're saying and the gestures that support those words. So right from the very beginning, know what you are going to say. It begins with that. Know what words you are going to put on the shelf, and then practice slowly and smoothly doing those opening gestures. Like a golfer takes a practice swing. Like a batter takes a practice swing in the on-deck circle, you need to take a practice swing with your gestures to make sure that your opening statement begins with the kind of energy and emphasis that makes the jury pay attention. So now stand up and practice.